And we are live. Welcome to MLB Deeper Dive. It is Friday, October 1st. I believe the final deeper dive of the baseball season. I am Josh Engelman. I am joined by Adam Scher. We're here to break down 14 games. We've only got an hour to do it, so we're going to move pretty quickly. Hit that like button as you get in the door. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. Adam, how are you?
Been better. Allergies kind of bother me a little bit, but excited to talk about baseball for the final time this regular season.
And to talk about sports just in general for the final time for a week. Enjoy yourself for these next couple days. But we got a lot to talk about here.
And watch you talk about football Sunday morning.
I'm sure you will. I have very little doubt that you'll be there checking to see how the show is doing without you, which, spoiler alert, it'll be great. And then live before lock, where we can bring you all of the goods all the way up till 1 o'clock. Oh, and my crunch is done. So let's just dive in now. I can deal with the crunch as I turn this one over to you. Let's start here. Nats and Red Sox, 4-run implied total for the Nats, 5.5 for the Red Sox. Josh Rogers and Eduardo Rodriguez are the two pitchers here, and this game is still wildly important for Boston. Erod projected for 17% ownership on DraftKings as of right now, 8% on FanDuel. How are you feeling about Erod against the Nats?
So kind of lukewarm. I like Erod as a pitcher. I think anybody that has watched our shows this year knows that he has a 27.4% strikeout percentage. When you put that in the context of this slate, that's 0.2 of a point behind Lance Lynn, who is, I believe, projected to be the most popular pitcher on DraftKings. I'm refreshing now, but I know that was the case earlier.
It is
projected to be the most popular pitcher on DraftKings. The concerns that I have are, one, Washington doesn't strike out a lot. They are tied with Houston for the third lowest strikeout percentage since the trade deadline. They've been an above average offense over that time too, but that's pretty heavily driven by Juan Soto with a 195 WRC plus. I think that this is a lineup where like Lane Thomas has been good, Soto and Bell are good, but then you drop off pretty quickly. But like even in this lineup, you have Jordy Mercer in there batting sixth. He can't hit, but he doesn't strike out a ton either. So it's not a great strikeout spot. Another concern, and I actually hadn't even thought about it until I happened to see Mike Petriello tweeting about it. This game being in Washington, you have an outfield for the Red Sox of Kyle Schwarber in left and JD Martinez in right. That certainly has the potential to make Erod get quote unquote unlucky on some balls in play, considering that if it's not hit right to them, it's probably falling in. So there are some pretty legitimate risks here for Rodriguez. The case for rostering him, especially if you're playing 150 lineups, would be that he's projected for actually less ownership on DraftKings than Steven Matz. He's $200 less expensive. I think that it's a little bit better strikeout spot for Matz, but you can't ignore either that Rodriguez's strikeout percentage this year is like 5 points higher. So if you think of it just in terms of what does it look like when each of these pitchers pitch well, I think Rodriguez's ceiling still warrants consideration. One other negative here is that we have also seen Alex Cora, the Red Sox manager, have pretty short leashes on his pitchers once they get that third time through the order, whether he's not necessarily taking them out before they even get there, but like Nick Pivetta last night, as soon as like the third time through, a couple of guys got on, he wasn't even really going to get hard. He just, a couple guys got on base and Cora just got him out of there like as soon as he could after 4 2/3 innings. So there's not any guarantee. I'm not viewing this as a spot where because the Red Sox have to win, Rodriguez has a very long leash. I think we've seen Boston show us that it's kind of the opposite. They're comfortable getting into their bullpen at sort of the first sign of trouble. So I think Rodriguez is pretty risky. I think if all goes well, he still has a high ceiling because of his strikeout percentage, but I don't particularly like the matchup. I don't particularly like how Alex Cora has been handling his pitchers from a DFS standpoint. So those things are, I think, working against him.
Josh Rogers?
Absolutely not.
Alrighty. I've got the Red Sox as my number 2 stack, along with my number 1 leverage stack. I have not looked at our top stack tool yet, so I'm curious to see where the Red Sox end up. But more curiously, how do you feel about Boston?
I feel pretty good. And this is a team that I really ended up not getting to them at all in that Baltimore series, even though they obviously were good plays just because of their matchups, but they were getting tons of ownership. That's not quite the case on this slate, where you have now Toronto facing Baltimore. Toronto is going to be the team that you're going to have to make that difficult decision on of this is clearly the best hitting spot on the slate, but they're also really popular. It's going to pull some ownership away from the Red Sox. Josh Rogers isn't anything special at all. So far in his starts this season, only a 15.3% strikeout percentage, 5.57 xFIP, 1.5 home runs per 9 innings. This is a pitcher, I made the point this morning, this is a pitcher that was in the Orioles system the last few years, and they let him move on. You've seen the pitchers the Orioles are using. This was a castaway from that organization very recently. So there's no real reason to think that this is some, good up and coming pitcher. I think it's still a very good spot for the Red Sox. I like going back to them here after they've let everyone down for 3 slates in a row. They're a bit more expensive than they were in the Baltimore series. That probably also pushes the ownership down a bit, but I do like getting to them here. I expect this will be the first time in a while that I've actually gotten a lot of Boston.
Would you expect Boston to be your main stack?
The way things look right now, yes.
Okay. Same situation for me. I don't have much to add for you there.
I would prefer it be Toronto, but if Toronto is going to project for twice the ownership, it's going to be Boston.
Absolutely. Do you have any interest in the Nats bats against Rodriguez?
Not really. I mean, obviously never going to tell anyone not to play Juan Soto, even lefty-lefty. I think it's fine. Rodriguez has never been lights out against left-handed hitters. Lane Thomas has hit well since coming over to the Nats at 4K. I think he's fine. But as a whole, the part of this order that you would want to get to, like 1 through 5, they're pretty expensive. So they don't really stand out from here.
All righty. Then let's keep it moving. We get to Yankees and Rays. Massive game for the AL East. How loaded is the AL East, by the way? Good God, 4 teams with 90+ wins.
Yeah, it's insane.
At least projected, I think. They might, 1 or 2 of them might be at like 88 or 89. It's not important. 4.3 run implied total for the Yankees, 3.9 for the Rays. Nestor Cortez and Shane McClanahan. Neither one of these guys is pulling any ownership. Does that seem weird to you, or will you just not be there as well?
No, I mean, I think it makes sense. I think you can make the case to get the Cortez as a pivot away from someone like Steven Matz, who is pulling a lot of ownership in that price range, or as a pivot away from Ranger Suarez. But he's not the priority. It's more so if you're going to popular bats, you can certainly use Cortez. He's been solid as a starter this year, 25.3% strikeout percentage. 4.52 xFIP is pretty high, but if you look at the batted ball data, his expected WOBA was low. So I don't completely buy into the elevated xFIP, but it is still a dangerous matchup against the Rays. They have a lot of power in this lineup. We know that at this point. So I'm not going out of my way to pay $8,900 for Cortez, but I do think he's at least good enough. And it's reflected in the top pitcher tool as well, where we have him with an 8% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, only about 2% projected ownership on DraftKings. That at least tells me where that, if I do have a lineup where maybe I piece together a lot of popular hitters, which typically isn't the route that I go. But if I did, you can use Cortez and just, hope that he beats Suarez on this particular slate.
Rays bats grading out quite a bit better for me than the Yankees bats are right now. I'm a little surprised by that. So it probably just a price thing more than anything else. I want to throw it to you. Do you prefer the Yankees or the Rays in this matchup?
I prefer the Rays. I think that it's a little, I don't know. I think they're similar, but I like the lineup a little bit better for Tampa. You still, obviously Luke Voigt's on the injured list. You don't have DJ LeMahieu today either. So this lineup gets ugly relatively quickly. Torres is leading off, which cool. That's a good lineup bump, but he's also not been very good this year. So that's not necessarily somebody that I want tons of exposure to. And then once you get past Gallo, you have Urshela batting 6th. That's fine, but normally he's at the bottom of their order. And then it just dies. You have Gardner, you have Higashioka, you have Odor. Not guys I'm really going out of my way to get to either. No Garrett Sanchez today, in addition to no Luke Voigt and no DJ LeMahieu. So a little bit watered down lineup there. Whereas with the Rays, I like that you have a Arozarena leading off. He's only 4,300. I like that you have Yandy Diaz back in the lineup. He's cheap. You have Manny Margot in there. You do run the risk of Brandon Lau probably is going to hit at some point, although, maybe not. The Rays aren't really playing for anything either, so who knows? But
not true.
I think that the pricing makes Tampa look a little bit better here. And then also Cortez has been pretty good, but I still just don't completely buy into him the same way that I do McClanahan. Like McClanahan's got really, really good stuff. When you watch Cortez, it's still kind of just like, okay, how is this guy really getting outs and how much longer does this last? Whereas McClanahan, it's pretty obvious how he's getting outs, and it's because he's filthy. So I do prefer going to the Tampa Bay side, but I think from a tournament perspective, they're both pretty similar in that neither team's getting much ownership. Both teams have power, and that's pretty much the appeal.
Rays are 98 and 61 right now. You think they're playing for 100 wins?
I don't think they care.
Okay. Just checking. I just want to put that out there. It's a nice round number. People like to get there. It's great
Was
for
that-
promotional materials.
Did that come up in chat, or was that actually like, did you bring that up on your own?
I brought that up on my own legitimately.
Okay.
I think it's the same as like, making a run for 70 wins in the NBA. Like I think sometimes teams actually care about it, even though we don't think that they do.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's possible.
Like, I don't think they're going to be like, oh, we're going to run out starters just to make sure that we can, pick up this W or anything. But I think you make the play for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably viewed more like, if that happens, that's cool.
Sure.
But yeah, because I mean, like multiple teams a year win 100 games in baseball usually.
Yeah, but you still want it, especially when you're the Rays in a division with the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Blue Jays in this particular season. Look, it's not like it's changing any of my outcomes. I don't want to harp on this any longer than we already have. I don't care about it at all. Just that they are 2 wins short of 100. Yeah, Adam for sure thought Sean V said it. Totally agree with chat. Yeah, I would attach very much 0 weight to it. I don't have a column in the spreadsheet to change my projections for it. I don't get the sense that I would get to Yankees bats today. Are you going to be getting there outside of one-offs?
I'm fine if I do, just because it's the Yankees at, like 1% ownership. But like I said, I think the Rays are going to be the easier side to get to. I do respect McClanahan as a pitcher. I respect Tampa Bay's bullpen behind him. Judge is expensive. Stanton's at 5,200. Again, if you're somebody looking at this, like I want to play the unknown Yankees, I think that's perfectly fine. You can always do that. For me, I think that they probably just don't really end up being much of a priority for me.
All righty. Blue Jays and your Orioles. And I just assumed that I typed this in incorrectly to start, but apparently not. 6.3 run implied total for the Jays, 3.4 for the Orioles. You don't see it every day where the team gets essentially doubled up. Steven Matz and Tom Eshelman. No one going to Eshelman. No surprises there. 25% of the field going to Matz at 8,700. Like, I get it. Feels a little high, but I get it.
Yeah, it feels pretty high to me too, just for a couple of reasons. For one, Matz isn't a great strikeout pitcher, and you do have him priced up here. He, for the season, has a 22.3% strikeout percentage. But the other thing that I think is a little bit of a concern is that this is an entirely right-handed Baltimore lineup, with the exception of Mullins, who's easily been the best hitter on the team this year. Matz against righties this year only has a 20.3% strikeout percentage. Sorry, 20.2% strikeout percentage. Against lefties, it's 29.6%. So in addition to the fact that he's not a great strikeout pitcher anyway, this is a lineup that sort of projects as one that he would have a little bit of trouble striking out. Not necessarily saying he gets blown up or anything like that, just that it's not the type of lineup that typically leads to Steven Matz having a ceiling game. It's also, 1 through 5, you do have some solid power here. Mullins, just really good in general. But since the start of the 2019 season, 248 expected ISO against left-handed pitching for Mountcastle, 193 for Hayes, 258 for Mancini, 205 for Severino. Then the lineup pretty much dies with Gutierrez, Nevin, Valleca, and Martin. And I think that's where you can expect Matz to really pick up some points. But it just goes back to, I understand why he's getting the ownership. Baltimore does only have a 3.3 implied run total here, which is clearly appealing. But it seems like he's getting a little bit more ownership than he should. And I think that's backed up by the top pitchers tool, where you have Matz getting 25% ownership with a 14% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. You compare that to Huascar Ynoa, $100 less expensive, 12% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, only getting 7% ownership. So, basically a 80% chance of, compared to Matz, of being a top 2 pitcher, but getting 1/3 the ownership. Similar thing with Tyler McGill at $200 more expensive. Marco Gonzalez getting less ownership. So I think that Matz projects well, but I do think right now he's projected for more ownership than he deserves compared to the alternatives, based on range of outcomes and the top pitchers tool.
I won't even ask you about Eshelman. So let's talk about the Blue Jays. They are the number 1 stack on the day. They're my number 1 stack. I also have them a little bit overowned, but I don't think that it's as bad as it seems, given how good of a matchup this is, how bad Eshelman is, the run total for the game. So I'm still happy to get to Toronto.
Yeah, for sure. I feel very similarly about Toronto tonight as I did Boston in their series with Baltimore. I don't think that they're just like objectively bad plays or anything like that. I don't look at Toronto's ownership and say, oh, that's way too much, you can't go to the Blue Jays, because this is very clearly a phenomenal spot. Tom Eshelman's average fastball velocity is, not even exaggerating, I think 84 miles an hour or something in that range. 86.5 miles an hour. So, basically a decent high school pitcher. and he's facing a team that doesn't strike out and has tons and tons of power. You've also got some cheap pricing on Toronto. You look at their lineup and, 1 through 5, Springer, Semien, Guerrero, Bichette, Hernandez, they are relatively expensive. But then Corey Dickerson is 2,800, Espinal's 2,300, Jansen's 3,200, Biggio is 3,200. So you get some really cheap bats toward the bottom of the lineup that can help offset that cost. Plus, you also don't have a lot of pitching to pay up for tonight. So that makes it a little bit easier to get to the Blue Jays as well. The only, concern is that it is the ownership. So I think it's just, either you prioritize going to the Blue Jays and using low-owned pitchers in those lineups, low-owned secondary stacks. That's where those guys like Nestor Cortez come in. Or you can just kind of go to the field and go to teams like Boston, go to teams like the Rays, go to these lower-owned teams that are nowhere near, or I don't want to say nowhere near in Boston's case, but in most cases aren't particularly close to Toronto in terms of chances of success. But where, for example, Tampa Bay has 1/4 the top stack percentage, they have 1/16 or 1/15 the projected ownership. So there's kind of two different ways you can approach this. Typically, for me, I prefer to go to low-owned hitters and get the better projected pitching because I think pitching is easier to project. But if you're someone that really wants to get to the Blue Jays, they're certainly not at an ownership level where I would say, oh, that's bad. You just can't do it. I just think you need to pay attention to what else is in your lineup.
Yeah, I think it should be pretty easy to fill out a lineup around them, 3 other hitters plus a pitcher or 2 that needs to be different. This ownership on a 14 gamer is it's really hard for them to really separate from the pack. One guy north of 20 is not going to get that done for me. So go Toronto. Baltimore bats against Mats, 25% owned.
I thought you meant Baltimore. I was like, what the hell?
No. Trey Mancini got to 1.7% if we want to talk about that.
Yeah, I'm actually interested in Baltimore in large field tournaments, especially I didn't look at what FanDuel's offering today, but I know DraftKings, we've seen it the last couple of days. It seems like they're just kind of punting on the end of baseball season, and even more so than normal are just going very top heavy. Tonight you have the 50K to first, 5K to third in the large field DraftKings tournament. So even more so than usual, there's merit to just kind of saying, screw it, I'm going to lose money in this tournament a very high percentage of the time. I really need to be trying to get first place. I think Baltimore is one of the teams that actually gets a little bit of a bump if you're thinking that way. Because for one, I mentioned it earlier when we talked about Mats, they do have power 1 through 5. Lefty, Mullins, you'd prefer he faces a righty, but he's just so good, it doesn't really matter. But Mountcastle, Hayes, Mancini, Severino, these guys all have power. Then you round it out with, a 2K Nevin or a 2K Valleca and just sort of hope for the best from those guys. But you're getting negative correlation against a popular pitcher. And you're also getting, if you're using that top part of the order for Baltimore, you are getting hitters that have power upside. It's not like you're going to, Miami, a team where it's just like, I don't really know how they win me a tournament because none of them hit home runs. You do have power with the Orioles. So I don't anticipate them being my highest owned team or anywhere close, but I do think they are actually a good team to get to in tournaments for a few different reasons.
I've gotten to him a little bit over the past couple of days. I think today is going to be another day as well. The Mats ownership certainly helps. Anything else for Jays O's? That was the big one for us.
No, that's about it.
A little bit less offense in this one. Marlins Phillies, 3.4 run implied total for the Marlins, 3.3 for the Phils. Sandy Alcantara and Ranger Suarez. Alcantara at 11% ownership. That one looked like a 7. Suarez, on the other hand, 35% owned at 8,800. Why Alcantara is 10-2, by the way, I'm not entirely sure. How do we handle the pitching? I think Alcantara is properly owned around 10%. I think Suarez is a bit over-owned at 35, no matter how good of a matchup this looks like.
Yeah, I'm interested in both pitchers here. So Alcantara, I thought, even early in the day, was an interesting option because he's relatively low-owned. One thing to like about him is that, yeah, he's 10,200, which seems expensive. He has a 24% strikeout percentage this year, which is fine, but typically not what you're getting at the top of the pricing tier. The Marlins aren't playing for anything, but they haven't shown any indication of pulling back the reins on him. He's gone at least 6 innings in, I think, 9 of his last 10 starts. He's throwing a lot of pitches. He's one of only 4 pitchers in baseball this year that's thrown at least 200 innings, along with Wheeler. I already forgot the rest of the list. Wheeler, Buehler, and Wainwright. Learned that on Twitter today. But so you're getting those innings. And on this particular slate, I think that's actually really valuable because a lot of the pitchers we're going to talk about, it's going to be, oh, well, I like this guy and he's good, but I'm not super confident how deep he goes into the game. Alcantara, I don't anticipate the Marlins have a short leash on him. It's also a home game, which probably helps. I would think, if there were any question, they'd be more likely to leave him in for their home fans than if they're on the road. So I do like the depth that you're likely to get from Alcantara, but also this Phillies lineup. They are not running out their best hitters here. This is a team that is difficult to strike out, and that is a negative for Alcantara. But typically you would have JT Realmuto, you would have Gene Segura, and you would have Andrew McCutchen. They've been replaced by Ronald Torreyes, Travis Jankowski, Andrew Knapp. The average WOBA against right-handed pitching since 2019 for the replacements is 273 compared to 319 for the three guys they are replacing. The average strikeout percentage goes from 19.9% to 20.6%. So nothing crazy there, but it is worth noting that whereas all three of the guys who are normally in the lineup are low strikeout guys, Torreyes and Jankowski are difficult to strike out, but Knapp strikes out like 30% of the time. So it does sort of give you one semi-free strikeout in there. So I think it's a very, very good matchup for Alcantara. He's also been much better at home this year, which is to be expected. I like getting to him, especially at relatively low ownership. For Suarez, I certainly don't. I kind of view him like the Blue Jays. I think that the ownership is a little higher than it should be if you're just looking in terms of Suarez versus all of the other pitchers in his price range and their chances of success versus his ownership. But I also think he pretty clearly projects as the top option in that price range. So it's a situation where, kind of like I was saying with Toronto, there's nothing wrong with playing Toronto. You just need to pay attention to the rest of your lineup. It's the same thing with Suarez. I expect to get a lot of Suarez just because I'm typically more willing to go to popular pitching and offset it with lower owned bats. But if I'm going to Toronto, I'm probably not playing a whole lot of Suarez with my Toronto stacks, for example. So really, really good spot for him. He's been good as a starter. Hasn't faced many good teams, but that's not changing tonight. Has a 24% strikeout percentage, 3.46 xFIP. So I really like Suarez here. I'm okay with the ownership, but just make sure that you're doing something to give yourself a chance to actually get first in a tournament.
Neither offense, right?
No, I don't really have anything. Brinson at 2,200 batting cleanup, I think is worth a mention. But other than that, I have nothing. This Miami lineup is even worse than usual.
That's hard to do.
I didn't know that was possible, but I don't know what Peyton Henry is. I'm looking now, but he's batting sixth. I've never heard of him. Devin Marrero is batting eighth. I had no idea that guy was still in professional baseball. I know he fields really well and can't hit. So, that's not bad for Suarez. Henry this year, 22 games at AAA for Miami, 19 at AAA for Milwaukee, 30 at AA for Milwaukee. Zips projects him for a 122 ISO, a 53 WRC plus. So not someone I'm too worried about.
Now they'd be better off playing you. Schedule for the rest of the day. MLB live before lock at 6 p.m. Greg and Terry going to close this one out, but we're not done at that point. At 7 o'clock, college football live before lock. Ben Raz and Matt Gajewski. That's going to be the one you're going to watch. College football, baby. It is here. Free content to MLB top pitchers, MMA rankings, and the NFL big board. Lots of good stuff for free for today. Braves and Mets. 4.5 run implied total for the Braves, 4.2 for the Mets. Inoa and McGill, and not really any ownership coming to either guy. 8% to Inoa. He's 8,600. McGill is 8,900. If you're going to get to these guys, I think like in that 5 to 10% range makes a lot of sense. I don't really want one guy all that much more than the other. Do you see a big separation here? Do you have any priorities coming from either pitcher?
I don't see a big separation. I think they're similar options. I do think Tyler McGill benefits from this Atlanta lineup, though. Yeah. The Braves clinched yesterday, and you can see it in their lineup. No Freddie Freeman. You do have Albies in there. No Duvall. No D'Arnaud. No Soler. So on the one hand, you are taking out some of those right-handed bats that strike out a lot. But on the other hand, you lose Freddie Freeman, and you're replacing those really dangerous bats with Guillermo Heredia, William Contreras, Orlando Arcia, not guys that you're particularly scared of. So McGill this year has posted very, very good strikeout numbers against right-handed hitters, very good numbers in general, 257 expected WOBA, 28% strikeout percentage. Against lefties, his strikeout percentage is like 5 points lower. He's allowed a 274 expected ISO, but the only left-handed bats that you're really concerned about are Peterson, Albies, and Rosario. If he can navigate his way through those guys, I think he has a pretty good chance for success here. Someone in chat also mentioned Bill Miller is the umpire in this game. That's what I'm seeing as well. So that's something where it's not, I never want to look at, one data point and say, oh, well, that makes this guy a lot better, but certainly favorable pitcher's umpire, one of the best in the league for pitching. So I do like this lineup for McGill. And then Inoa on the other side, he we don't know, exactly how deep he'll go into this game. The Braves aren't playing for anything. You could certainly just see kind of wherever he's at after 5 innings, he comes out. But he does have good strikeout stuff. The Mets as a whole have been disappointing offensively this year. So just as a pivot away from, a popular Suarez or a popular Mats, I think is fine. But I feel a little bit better about McGill just given the Braves lineup tonight.
I'm guessing you don't love the bats on either side other than just, like individual one-offs.
Yeah, I mean, I really like Jack Peterson at 3,700. Albies is obviously good. Rosario is fine, but as a whole, not really interested in hitting here. You also don't have Michael Conforto in for the Mets, who has sort of been the one guy I've liked to roster recently.
All right, good to move it on.
Yeah.
Rangers and Indians, 4.3 run implied total for the Rangers, 4.7 for the Indians. Spencer Howard and Eli Morgan. To me, neither guy, someone you're going to roster today.
Eli Morgan against the Rangers is sort of interesting just because he is facing the Rangers. He's been better at getting strikeouts than I expected him to be this year. Overall, a 22.2% strikeout percentage. He's still very volatile. He's not a very good pitcher overall. He's allowed almost 2 home runs per 9 innings, certainly capable of getting blown up. But on the other hand, the Rangers are one of the worst offenses in baseball. We don't have much ownership going to Morgan here, only about 2% on DraftKings. So I think he's fine, but I also don't really know how much you're going to need to get to that price point. And there's also a couple of guys that I think are a little bit better in that price range. So if you're playing 150 lineups, getting to some Morgan, I think is okay. If you're playing 1 lineup or 3, I doubt that I would get there.
All righty. What about bats? Cleveland not pulling any ownership. I'm a little interested in some of the power here. Rangers side, not really all that interested outside of Willie Calhoun in that leadoff spot. This doesn't feel like a place where I'm going to get a lot of 5-man stacks.
No, me neither. If I do, I'm more interested in the Cleveland side of it. Spencer Howard has struggled this year. You don't have the best bullpen behind them in Texas. Ramirez, we know, is a strong option, even though he's expensive. But then the rest of this team is really cheap, especially once you get past Ramirez. Harold Ramirez batting 4th at 2,400, then Zimmer, then Mercado, Bobby Bradley's cheap. So I do actually like the value that the Indians offer. They are not projected for much ownership right now either, which is actually, I think, kind of weird given how cheap they are. So I do like Cleveland. I don't like Texas, although Willie Calhoun at 2,300 and Nate Lowe batting cleanup, I think are reasonable options.
I've got nothing else for Rangers and Indians. So we're on to Astros and A's. 4.5 run implied total for the Astros, 3.9 for the A's. Framber Valdez and Sean Manaea. I need to start here. I'm just curious. Do you have interest in Manaea at 9,100? He is unowned.
I mean, I don't. I hate the matchup. The Astros are tough to strike out. This also is not the best Astros lineup, though.
It is. Altuve, yeah, it's really good for him.
No Altuve, no Brantley. Basically, all you have is Bregman, Alvarez, and Correa. I actually hadn't seen the lineup until just now. So I'm definitely more interested in Manaea than I was this morning. When I did the show with Greg, Houston had a 4.8 implied run total, dropped to about 4.3 now. When I did the show this morning, I sort of with Manaea said that if you were playing 150 lineups, I thought he was certainly someone you could use just based on talent as a pivot away from Suarez, for example, because I thought that he would beat Suarez often enough to be worth it. But I also thought that there would be plays I got to before Manaea. Now I think Manaea does move up the board at least a little bit when you look at this lineup because it's just nowhere near as good an Astros lineup as you normally get. No Tucker either. I forgot to mention him. No Gurriel. So yeah, it's definitely a more appealing spot for Manaea right now than it was this morning. I think him and McGill both have jumped quite a bit for me.
Relative to ownership, I think Sean Manaea is the best pitching play on the slate.
I think that's fine.
Strikeout rate, Jose Siri has a 39% K rate in Steamer. The bottom 4 guys in this order, 24, 25, 24, 33. You're missing out on a bunch of these guys. Sean Manaea is just actually good. The fact that he is unowned is bonkers. The fact that Lance Lynn is 39% owned directly above him and Sean Manaea is projecting for nothing is interesting to me. Obviously, Lance Lynn should be getting more ownership. I have him projected significantly higher, but I like the idea of getting to Sean Manaea. What'd you say?
Did you say Lance Lynn obviously deserves more ownership?
No, he deserves the ownership that he has, like more ownership than Sean Manaea.
Oh, yeah, okay. I was, as usual, half listening, and I just heard that part, and I was just like, "Whoa, I'm not sure I'm there."
Like ownership is at 39% Lynn, 1% Manaea. Yeah. I have it at 37-17.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, maybe a little higher on Manaea than me, but that was the point that I'd made this morning, where Manaya is you would never give someone 38-1 that on Lynn or even Suarez. But I thought that there were some other options that I would get to before I got to Manaya. Now I think it's a lot closer because Manaya it's still not like it's a bad Houston team. They still are going to be relatively difficult to strike out. They still have a strong 3, 4, and 5, but it's nowhere near the Houston team that Manaya is priced to face and that we were assuming he was going to face.
What about Valdez?
I'm not particularly interested in him here. I would rather go to Alcantara. I think with the A's, you get a lineup that's pretty difficult to strike out, but also is just better than the Philadelphia lineup. Although this lineup also isn't the best. You have Chad Pinder batting cleanup, but I think that it's still a more difficult spot than it is for Philadelphia. I also think I know that Alcantara is a better strikeout pitcher than Framber Valdez. Valdez is a good real life pitcher. He gets a lot of ground balls. He does a very good job of limiting power, but that doesn't translate to fantasy points unless he's going deep into the game. So I'd be more inclined to just use Alcantara if I'm going to that price range.
I am not going to either team for bats. The Astros lineup doesn't appear to be the actual Astros lineup. I'm missing quite a few key Astros, and I don't really want to target against Valdez or Manaya. Do you like either the Astros or the A's?
Not really now. I kind of had liked Houston this morning, assuming they were going to play a real lineup, but they're not, so I don't.
All righty. Well, then we have a couple things to talk about quickly before we continue to move on. And the first one of those is going to be the promo code. That would be MLB Deeper Dive. You get access to everything we have to offer. It's the Awesemo Plus Weekly Pass. It's $29.95. You're getting that for 25% off. That's projections, ownership, top stacks, top pitchers, top stacks, top stacks. Yeah, I'm saying it a couple times because we have it in a couple different sports. Everything that we have to offer behind the paywall, you can get using that promo code MLB Deeper Dive. Again, one big word, 25% off. But what we really need to talk about is the Awesemo Hall of Fame. And boy, did we get a big one yesterday for the showdown. Rich Green 4, active member in our premium Slack. Two-way chop in the millie for NFL Showdown, $560,526.31. Boy, oh boy, is that a big win. We haven't talked Hall of Fame in a while. We definitely needed to touch on it here. So, Rich, congratulations. I assume you go by Rich. Rich, congratulations. Either way, Rich Green 4, $560,000 richer. I love seeing stuff like this. Like people pick up wins from time to time. $560,000 is legitimate life-changing money.
Yeah, awesome to see. Like it's like when you play as often or as long, like it's always cool to see people win. But like normally, whatever the number is, you kind of just like say, "Oh, cool, like that's awesome," and you like move on. But yeah, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, 560 is you get the 20K win. We're going to talk about a couple more wins that are still really, really nice victories. 560,000. That one, that's different. So congratulations again. That is so awesome. Melissa last night in FanDuel single entry took down the safety for got first out of 11,904, $2 entry fee, but still that's a difficult tournament to win with 1,200 or 12,000 people in it. So Melissa, kudos there. Who else do we got here? John Jeff picked up a first for 20K on FanDuel. Always good to see. So it looks like Awesemo logos at the top of both FanDuel and DraftKings yesterday. And then finally, Boss Hog Daddy Dog picked up a first place in the Mini Max for 4K. Once again, congratulations. Congrats to everybody. Download that Awesemo profile picture at awesemo.com/avatar. Tweet your wins at Awesemo HOF, and you can win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. All right, Adam, we're at the halfway point. Let's keep it moving. White Sox and Tigers, 5.3 run implied total for the Sox, 3.2 for the Tigers. Lance Lynn and Willie Peralta. No one going to Willie Peralta. Everybody going to Lance Lynn. 39% owned, 9,500. Great matchup against the Tigers. I don't think that there's anything else that I could possibly say here. To me, very clearly, Lance Lynn is the best pitching option today.
Okay. I mean, I think that's reasonable. I don't strongly disagree. I think the range of outcomes is wider than people are giving it credit for.
Go for it.
So in his last 3 starts, So he had missed the start, and then he came back September 12th. 70 pitches, 83 pitches, 105 pitches. That's great. I think the assumption from everyone here is that Lynn just isn't going to be limited at all in his last start of the season, even though the White Sox don't have anything to play for. I think that's fine. I certainly think it's possible. I also think it's possible that they were looking to ramp him up, and then this just kind of turns into like, an 80 pitch start, get ready for the postseason and move on. So I don't think it's a lock that he just goes 100 plus pitches here. I also don't think he necessarily needs to be a good option on this slate. He can throw 85 pitches against the Tigers at 9,500 and still be one of the best pitching options. So I'm not even saying it in the context of like, I intend to be way under the field on Lance Lynn or anything like that. I just do think it's worth mentioning that I think people like, if you're, I don't know how to phrase it, but like, I just think that the pitch count floor for Lance Lynn today is probably lower than most people are thinking.
That's fair. I understand where you're coming from.
Like, it wouldn't be shocking if he gets Brandon Woodruff.
Absolutely. That I agree with. Absolutely. Like, all the other signs clearly point in Lance Lynn's favor. The Tigers stink. They strike out a lot. The run total's great. There's nothing not to like there, but that is definitely a worry for people. I don't imagine you're going to Willie Peralta.
Yeah, I am not going to Willie Peralta.
Just an absolutely terrible statement that Lynn is clearly the best option. Lance Lynn, 39% owned today at 9,500. The public seems to think that he's the clear option, and the data agrees with it. There is just downside that is available. But
their reasoning is they never considered Lynn. You should probably get better.
Nothing points in Lynn's favor. Best of luck on you, because I assume you don't win a goddamn thing when you play DFS. Good God. Really. White Sox bats, 4th overall for me, 22nd in leverage. Certainly happy to get here against Peralta, who profiles with a 5.06 FIP in Steamer.
Yeah, no issue with the White Sox. They don't have anything to play for, but they are still running a solid lineup out there. They're relatively expensive 1 through 4, but then you do get some discounted hitters with Jimenez at 4,200, Moncada at 4K, and then the bottom of the order is even less expensive. Peralta, just not a very good pitcher. The White Sox are they're getting some ownership, but nothing crazy. They're definitely a team where I would like, if I'm not going to Toronto and I'm not going to Minnesota, who we haven't talked about yet. If you're someone in that boat, I think Chicago is one of the teams you probably do get to, just because they're not that overowned, they're not that popular, and they do certainly have a very high ceiling. If you are going to teams like the Blue Jays and the Twins, you're probably not mixing them with the White Sox because of ownership. So that would force you away from Chicago. So I think it's another one of those where it kind of just depends on what your overall strategy for the slate is, but they are clearly one of the highest upside offenses.
Don't think that the Tigers are one of the highest upside offenses.
No, neither do I.
Okay.
Like Akil Baddoo is always fine, but I don't really have much there. Lance Lynn is one of the best pitchers on the slate, 27.5% strikeout percentage, 3.78 xFIP. The only real question mark for Lynn is exactly how do the White Sox handle him, but that doesn't translate into, being concerned the Tigers are going to light him up or anything.
Royals and Twins, 4.7 run implied total for the Royals, 4.8 for the Twins. John Heasley and John Gant, battle of the Johns. Doesn't appear to me that either guy is getting any ownership. I don't have either one of them breaking 5 innings either. Are you going to get to either one of these guys for value?
No.
Amazing. Okay.
Nothing else on that.
No, that's fine. No, your amazing wasn't, or my amazing wasn't for that. I don't blame you either. I don't want to get to either of these guys. I do have interest in the bats. I've got the Twins 3rd. I've got the Royals 5th. The Twins are the most overowned stack. I think that is also a very true statement, not just for me, but for our top stack tool. But I think the Royals are also a little interesting. I'd like to target offense on both sides here. You just have to be very wary of the public ownership.
Yeah, agreed. It's a good spot for the Twins for sure. John Heasley, nothing to make you really think that he's any good. The Twins are a little bit mispriced. They're not dirt cheap, but Buxton at 4,700 still offers value, as does Polanco, as does Donaldson. Kepler, Sano, Arias are very cheap. Rooker is essentially free. Gordon is free. Jeffers as a catcher is free. So it's a team that is in a good spot, but they are also one of the best value offenses, and that's causing them to be popular. But you can also, like, when you look at the projected ownership for this team. Jeffers at 6%, Gordon at 4%, not guys you really want, but if you use them in a stack, that's at least going to make you somewhat contrarian. But also you can use them as like 2-mans and 3-mans where you're stacking a lower owned team as your 5-man, Tampa or something like that off the top of my head, and then using Donaldson, Buxton to fill it out. I think that's one way that I like to approach teams like this where they are in really good spots and they're really cheap. I don't necessarily want to just say, oh, they're popular, I'm just not going to play some of the best hitters on the board, but maybe I'll just, use them, mix them into lower owned stacks to round out my lineup. So I do think Minnesota's in a good spot. You just want to be aware of the rest of the team. Also, when I mentioned those ownership numbers, I was looking on FanDuel and not DraftKings, so kind of ignore that.
By the way, who do you think the expected head-to-head or the expected cash game pitchers are on DraftKings today?
Haven't built yet, but probably Suarez and Lynn.
Okay, just checking. I like the Royals here in a weird way. I don't know. I just don't respect Gant. I probably should a little bit more. Where are they in the top stack, Joel?
You should what? A little respect Gant?
A little bit more.
I mean, maybe I don't think he's particularly good. He has done a good job, I guess, of limiting power. He just doesn't get strikeouts. But I do like Kansas City here to some extent. Like the ownership, they're projected to go a little bit overowned, but it's kind of just pulled up by Merrifield at 10%. He's the only hitter on DraftKings at 10%. Dozier's at 9 at 2,700. Perez is at 8. I really don't mind getting to Kansas City. Benintendi at 4K batting cleanup looks pretty nice. Perez clearly the highest upside catcher every time he plays. Mondesi I think is actually a pretty interesting spot to pay up to be contrarian. I don't think he's going to get much ownership. We have him projected at 3%. He's overpriced batting 7th, but he's really fast, so gives you a pretty nice ceiling. Not a number one, like not a top 3 stack for me, but do have some interest in the Royals.
All right. Anything else here for Royals and Twins?
Nope.
Cardinals and Cubs, 4.5 run implied total for the Cards, 3.5 for the Cubs. Dakota Hudson going for St. Louis, and now updated starter for Chicago, Corey Abbott on the hill for the Cubs. I don't expect to get too much Hudson. He is 5% owned. I don't know anything about Abbott for today. I had Alzolay in as the starter until this show started. So pitching for you in this one? Yeah. Oh my God, I almost burped.
I had Alzolay in too. I have Corey Abbott's Fangraphs page in front of me. He's made 6 appearances with the Cubs this year, 12 1/3 innings pitched, 12.9% strikeout percentage, 14.5% walk percentage, 19 starts at AAA, 96 innings pitched. He did strike out 29.8% of hitters. Zips has him striking out 9 per 9 innings with a 5.37 FIP. So strikeout stuff probably there. Results probably not. The Cardinals lineup looks better today than it did the game that they had Carpenter batting cleanup. I don't remember if that was yesterday or the day before. I don't mind the Cardinals, but not my favorite stack still. They are kind of expensive. You do have Newbar batting 5th at 2,400. Bader's batting 6th. Those are both pretty solid values. So the Cardinals, I think, are a decent tournament stack. Not my favorite, but a team that I do think is going a little bit under-owned.
Okay. I got them 20th. I mean, I do have them a little under-owned. I don't really see myself getting to all that much offense in this game, either side, Cards or Cubs. Yeah,
the Cubs are free, and Dakota Hudson doesn't really miss bats. He has typically had trouble with left-handed power. That doesn't do you a whole lot of good here, though, when the only lefties that you can roster are Rafael Ortega, Ian Happ, and Sergio Alcantara. But Happ at 3K, Ortega at 2,900, I think are pretty solid options. As a whole, though, it's a pretty tough team to stack, especially when you don't have top-end pitching to really pay for.
Anything else in this game?
Nope.
Got to give a shout out to the sponsor before we keep going. That would be Jock Market. Whether this is NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, you can make real money at any point in time during the game. You can sell off those shares immediately if you would like. You're picking up all of these shares in their pregame IPO phase, and then you can buy, sell, or hold during the game or all the way up until all of the games are complete. You could also short players if you're interested. Go download the app in the App Store. Use the promo code Awesemo when signing up. Get yourself a up to a $50 bonus on that first deposit. This offer is exclusive to the Awesemo community. You don't want to sleep on it. I promise you. Use the promo code Awesemo. Get yourself a little bit of extra cash on that first Jock Market deposit. 4 more games to go. Diamondbacks and Rockies up next. 4.5 run implied total for the Diamondbacks, 4.7 for the Rockies. Humberto Castellanos and John Gray, both on the hill. Gray, 3% owned. Castellanos, 1% owned. Will you be rostering either pitcher?
Sorry, can the Arizona game, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So John Gray, I think, is kind of interesting. He isn't projected for much ownership. He's at 3% on DraftKings, 7% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. It's a good matchup against Arizona. As a team, this is one of the weaker offenses in baseball. Gray is getting outside of Coors Field. The thing that I don't like here is the actual lineup that the Diamondbacks are running out there. Gray has posted much, much better strikeout numbers against righties than lefties this year. He's struck out 28.8% of righties compared to 20.5% of lefties. It's not that he's given up a ton of production to lefties, but the strikeout gap is pretty big. The only right-handed hitters in the lineup for Arizona tonight are Christian Walker batting 6th and the pitcher Castellanos batting 9th. So I do think, kind of similar to what we talked about with Steven Matz, it drives down the strikeout expectation for John Gray a little bit. But at the same time, there's not really been any pitching on this slate that you can't point to at least one thing and say, yeah, but this. And so that's not enough to completely drive me away from him at low ownership. But it does make me go from like absolutely loving John Gray, if this were a more balanced lineup, to not being quite as high on him just because there are so many lefties.
Interesting offensive stance here. We've got a couple guys in double-digit ownership on Arizona and on Colorado. I've got Colorado 7th, Arizona 9th. Is this a spot where you end up getting to offense? We know what Colorado is on the road. We know what Arizona is everywhere. Can you roster these bats?
I assume that I end up just not really getting to it. This is one of those teams where I think that they project well, or both of these teams, there are players that project well at their salaries, but point per dollar hitters only matter so much. You're still more interested in power upside and, just guys that are likely to homer, teams that are likely to go off, especially on a slate where, once again, there's just not a lot of top end pitching to pay for. So yes, I think Josh Rojas leading off at 3,600 with third base shortstop eligibility is a very good value. I don't think he's a player that I necessarily need to be getting to at 14% owned. I think there's a lot of guys that are comparable hitters that I can get to at much lower ownership. Same goes for Calhoun. Same goes for Tapia. Same goes for CJ Cron. It's not that they're bad plays. If they were 2-3% owned, I would be saying that I like these guys because they are relatively inexpensive. But as is, I just think that there's guys that I like it lower ownership. And then the guys, the other hitters, some of the other hitters we talked about that are popular, like I would rather be getting to those Twins bats. I think those are actual guys that have lots of power and a pretty high chance of success, where here it's just sort of like guys I don't feel that strongly about.
I'm shocked to see Colorado be 4th in the top stack tool and almost 3rd.
We were surprised about it this morning too. I thought maybe it would change, but it hasn't.
I got them 7th, so I don't even think that it's so crazy. I just think that
they have a 4.7 implied run total.
I also think that there's like 7 teams in that area that all could just be the same sort of stack. I think they're nominally 4th here or 7th for me, but the separation isn't really there. Like I don't have the Rangers or the Indians or the Rays all that different than some of these guys, like White Sox, Royals, they're all kind of jammed together. They're all not Toronto and Boston. It's really the easiest way to say it.
Yeah. You also have had, Atlanta's lineup came out, Houston's lineup came out. So True. Those are teams that also, sort of move down the board.
Anything else? Diamondbacks and Rocks?
No, just some decent hitting. I like John Gray. No interest in Castellanos.
On to Giants and Padres. 5.1 run implied total for the Giants, 3.7 for the Pods. Anthony Desclafani and Pedro Avila. Avila does not appear to have a salary on either site, so we're going to go ahead and skip him. Anthony Desclafani, on the other hand, 5% owned, 7,200. I'm a little interested in Desclafani.
Yeah, I feel pretty similarly about Desclafani to how I feel about John Gray, where he's just a pretty good pitcher for his price tag. Desclafani for the season has a 22.5% strikeout percentage, 3.96 xFIP. He's in the best pitcher's park in baseball. The Padres have some dangerous hitters in their lineup, but this is another team that we don't have their lineup yet. We could certainly get a watered down Padres lineup here. They're, who cares at this point? So you have the potential for it to look even better for Desclafani, but at 7,200, he's just a pretty decent pitcher. The Giants are still competing with the Dodgers technically for the division. So I think that you don't really need to be concerned about Desclafani being pulled at 60 pitches for no reason or anything like that. It's just, I think, a pretty solid option at low ownership when the popular pitchers on this slate, I understand why they're popular, but they're not guys where you're just looking at them and saying, oh man, I'd be shocked if they failed. I can't figure out how it would happen. Like I can tell you exactly how every single popular pitcher fails. So on slates like that, I really don't mind taking my chances on guys like Desclafani here.
How do you feel about the offenses in this one? I don't see the Padres as all that interesting. Obviously, Tatis and Machado don't totally count in that discussion. On the Giants side, though, I have them 8th. They're not pulling all that much ownership. I have them 7th in leverage. If I look at our top stacks tool, we have them 7th overall and a little under owned.
Yeah, I'm interested in the Giants. 5.4 implied run total in San Francisco. We know how much power is in this lineup. I don't know a ton about Avila. Looking at his FanGraphs page, he has thrown a total of 5 1/3 innings in the major leagues ever. That was in 2019 in one game with the Padres. This year, 13 games at AAA, 1 start, 22 1/3 innings, 5.75 xFIP. I'm assuming that he's not great. So I like my chances with the Giants, but at the same time, I also doubt Avila goes too far into this game, and I typically don't like bullpen games. But if they're not getting ownership, which right now they're not projected for, I do like getting to the Giants and just hoping for the best with a really talented lineup. And also worth noting, the Giants have gone back to being pretty cheap. We've seen their pricing like really fluctuate over the last month or so, and it had gotten to a point where a lot of the guys were priced up. But now on DraftKings, you have Crawford back to 4,600. He's having a great year. You have Chris Bryant at 4,700. Lamont and Wade may or may not be in the lineup, but he's 4K. So you're getting more favorable pricing than you've had recently as well.
Tatis and Machado, maybe Cronenworth a little bit, but that's not really a Padres stack in general.
Yeah, I don't really see much reason to get to it. Like Tatis at 5K is always going to be a good option. Machado at 4,900 is always going to be fine. Cronenworth is always fine, but they're not a priority as a whole.
How many people do you think have ever had the first base shortstop eligibility on DraftKings?
Yeah, that's a weird one. It gets me every time.
It's for all intents and purposes to me impossible. Those are like the two opposite sides of the fielding spectrum. If you can play short capably, you should never play first. Go play center, go play anywhere else, not first.
Yeah, but when Eric Hosmer is your first baseman and you're trying to find ways to get Frazier and Tatis and Machado into the lineup, you end up with Cronenworth at first.
I guess. Fair enough. All right, we'll keep going. Mariners and Angels, 4-run implied total for the Mariners, 3.5 for the Angels. Marco Gonzalez and Jose Suarez. Gonzalez, 16% owned. I agree with it. He's 8,400. Suarez, 62% owned, or $6,200. He's 8% owned. That would have been interesting. I don't mind getting a little bit more of Suarez here, but the preference is Marco Gonzalez, although I don't feel like either guy is an actual preference.
So in the deep dive article today, I had said that typically as anytime I see Marco Gonzalez at 8,400 or 8,100, which is his price on FanDuel, I just have no interest. But today I actually am interested because I think he's one of the few pitchers on the slate that you can feel relatively confident in how deep into the game he's going to go if he pitches well. The Mariners are still competing for the American League wild card. Gonzalez has been going deep into games. He's thrown at least 90 pitches in 9 of his last 10. The only game he didn't, he had a rough start through 86 pitches. He's thrown at least 100 in 4 of his last 10, 2 of his last 4. He's not a very good strikeout pitcher, only an 18.3% strikeout percentage for the year, but the Angels do give you some strikeouts. They only have a 3.4 implied run total, which is one of the lowest on the slate. This is just a slate where it's kind of similar to yesterday. There's 26 pitchers going. Typically the tournament winning pitchers end up, scoring a lot of points, and it's just a matter of, hoping you're on the right ones. It wouldn't really be that surprising if, like the best pitchers today are like 21, 22 fantasy points, just because there's so few that we're expecting to really give you 6-7 innings. So Gonzalez being one of those guys against an Angels team that does strike out a bit, makes me a lot more interested in him than I typically would be at this price.
I got the Mariners 22nd. I got the Angels 21st. This is not a game for offense for me.
Yeah, not really on the offense this year. Suarez, not a great strikeout pitcher, but he's held righties to a 120 expected ISO this year, 298 expected WOBA. You can pretty much always make a case for getting to like Mitch Haniger. Ty France has some power. Seager's always a solid option. But with all of the good offenses that we've talked about that either are in really good spots or are low owned and give you a lot of upside, it's hard for me to get to Seattle.
Well, let's close out the final deeper dive of this MLB season with the Dodgers and the Brewers. Clayton Kershaw, Eric Lauer, 4.8 run implied total for the Dodgers, 3.2 for the Brewers. Kershaw, 16% owned. I think that's pretty appropriate. I got him at 19% coming out of the sim. Eric Lauer at 8,700. I did not get to, and I don't plan to. What do you want to do with Kershaw first and foremost? And if you have any Eric Lauer thoughts that are better than Sean V's, let me know.
I actually like Kershaw here. So I think that whereas when we talked about Lynn, I said that I thought there was a good chance that he'd be allowed to throw a lot of pitches, but that I thought it was kind of being taken for granted and that you could see less. Kershaw, I think his recent games might be a little bit misleading as far as what he'd be allowed to do. Since coming back from the injured list, he threw 50 pitches in 4 1/3 against Arizona. Then he threw 74 pitches in 5 innings against the Reds. Then he threw 73 in 4 1/3 against Arizona. I think there's a tendency to just kind of look at that and say, oh, they pulled him at 75 pitches, give or take 2 games in a row. But he was pulled mid-inning in that last start. I went back and pulled up that game log earlier, and he gave up an infield single to start the inning. Then he gave up another single, got a ground out, gave up an RBI single, and then was taken out of the game down 4-0. So he was given the opportunity to go deeper. Like if he's pitching and not giving up hits and runs in that inning, I don't think he gets pulled as soon as he gets to 75 pitches or anything. I think you could see, 85 pitches from Kershaw tonight if he's pitching well. So I think that he's a pretty appealing option given the fact that he's only projected for 16% ownership on DraftKings right now. If you were getting Lance Lynn's ownership, I would, stay away and just hope that Kershaw doesn't beat me in 80 to 85 pitches. But at 16%, you're talking about a pitcher that has a 29.9% strikeout percentage this year. It's the highest on the slate, 2.86 xFIP. The Brewers have a 3.2 implied run total. I like getting to Kershaw here and, just hoping that I'm right and that he can go 85 pitches or so.
What about Lauer?
I don't see it. He has struck out about 26% of righties this year, which is A, surprising, and B, really good. But this isn't your average lineup of right-handed hitters. It's just a lineup top to bottom that has a bunch of dangerous righties. Lauer's not cheap whatsoever. So I have no argument in favor of Lauer.
How do you want to handle the Dodgers bats? They're not a highly ranked stack for me. I have them 10th, but I do have them 3rd in leverage. They are pulling no ownership at all. If you want to go to a cheaper pitching combo, I like the idea of going to the Dodgers.
Yeah, the ownership is the big piece for me here because Lauer has been a solid pitcher this year, 26.7% strikeout percentage against righties, 168 expected ISO, only a 296 expected WOBA. None of that is going to make you super excited to get to an offense against him. But when you just think in terms of the Dodgers lineup and how good they are and how much upside there is if Eric Lauer is not on top of his game, and then you realize that there is no ownership projected to go here, Trey Turner leading the way at 4.7% on DraftKings, it's really, really easy to see how you potentially just win a slate with the Dodgers. So I do like getting to them, especially because the opportunity cost of paying up for bats on this slate isn't nearly as high as it is on a lot of slates because the pitching mostly sucks.
But Eric Lauer's the Dodgers whisperer. How in the world could they ever succeed?
Yeah.
Anyway, any other thoughts for this game?
Nope.
Any other thoughts for this slate?
I didn't realize he had said actually he's known as it. Like I'm sure Trey Turner and Mookie Betts are sitting at their lockers right now talking about how they're facing the Dodgers whisperer.
How are we going to make it through this game? Man, Eric Lauer's on the hill. Holy shit. Guys, hit that like button. Final deeper dive of the year. We're at 84. We need to go north of 100, but as many as you want to put on there, that would be great. Adam, any other further thoughts before we get out of here? Turn it over to Live Before Lock.
There's always a lot of variance and volatility in baseball. At this point in the year, just expect more of it. Don't be surprised if whatever pitcher, Lance Lynn or Suarez or Alcantara, whatever, don't be surprised if whatever pitcher you roster just, ends up getting pulled for reasons that, aren't really what you were expecting. So it just kind of goes back, that combined with the very top heavy nature of tournaments right now. Really don't be afraid to play lineups that, or I guess more so I should say, don't be afraid to get away from what appear to be the best options if they're popular, because I think that there's just even more volatility here than normal because you have a lot of not only the volatility that comes within a game, but a lot of just, managerial decisions that we may not see coming.
That will do it, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for hitting that like button. You almost made it to 100. We'll see you get over there for Live Before Lock. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. Live Before Lock coming up next. Good luck today. Enjoy your weekend, everybody.
It is the Awesemo MLB Live Before Lock show, sponsored by Jock Market, and we're running out of baseball slates to talk about here soon, Terry. We almost got the postseason coming up, and I don't know how much you've looked into the postseason, but it's a pretty thin schedule. There's only really 1 or 2 games the majority of the postseason. They've really kind of spread the schedule out, a lot more rest days than normal. So I don't know how many more baseball shows we're going to be doing. We haven't really planned out the schedule ahead of time. But how are you dealing with baseball going away?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm looking forward to the playoffs. My Yankees are, knock wood, going to be in there unless this next couple of days doesn't go completely tragically. But yeah, it's always a sucky part of the year. Baseball is my favorite, and just you have it with you all summer long, and it's just a staple in your life for 6 months basically, and then it just kind of disappears on you like that. So yeah, welcome to the last relevant anyway MLB DFS slate of the year. We'll have tomorrow's content up, but it's a split slate between the afternoon and the evening, I'm sure, again as usual on Saturdays, and then Sunday's going to be dead. So this is it. Get your big win now when you can, people.
Yeah, and by the way, speaking of big winners, we had somebody last night went over $500,000 in the NFL Showdown slate. So, hey, if you guys aren't going to be playing MLB DFS into the postseason, if you're looking for other DFS sports play, we've got everything covered over at Awesemo, and you could get an Awesemo Plus weekly pass for $29.95. That encompasses all the DFS sports basically out there. And there's some DFS sports for like esports and stuff that we cover. I've never even heard of those things, but they're up on the site. You can also use the promo code MLB Live Before Lock, all one word, all capital letters. They'll get you 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. So plenty of other DFS sports to get into for sure. But let's talk about tonight's baseball slate, and starting with the pitching options. What are some of the things that just immediately stand out to you about the pitchers on the high end? Because there are guys up there like Sandy Alcantara, Clayton Kershaw. On the high end, those are really the highest priced pitchers. But do you have any concerns with the salary on either of those guys? Kershaw being over $10,000 on both FanDuel and DK. Sandy Alcantara over $10,000 on DK, $9,300 on FanDuel. Neither one of them are picking up that much ownership. But are they plays you're looking to get to in tournaments?
So I wrote about Kershaw a little bit in my article today, and I know Adam was just winding it up on the last show a little bit when they were hitting the Dodgers game toward the end there. I'm a little bit concerned about the depth. I know we were talking about like a 75 pitch count. It's Clayton Kershaw. We can certainly get there with that many pitches if we have to, but it's not necessarily the best spot on the board for us today. I don't love it going to Kershaw. So I think if he was priced down for the amount of pitches, the amount of innings we've been seeing, like if he was around even the $9,000 range, 9,200, something like that on DK, I think I'd be a little bit more interested, or at least a little less worried about it. But the innings potential there concerns me. He's a little bit precious. He's had, quirky kind of injuries with his back, with different things over the course of his career. So I feel like they're going to continue to treat him with kid gloves. They're still only 2 games out of the division with 3 to play. So they've got a shot here. It makes sense that he would get a reasonable shot at like 5 innings, get them toward a win, but I don't know for sure that we're getting that. So on a board where I see a lot of pitchers somewhat similarly with a broad mid-range and not that much up top, I'm kind of willing to sacrifice the Kershaw spot. And if it burns me, it burns me. Save a little bit of money on some of the other pitchers, I think, and spread it around.
Yeah, that's where I'm at with Kershaw as well. I just don't think there's going to be enough length there for me to get to. And by the way, I kind of messed that up. I should have talked about Kershaw separately from Alcantara, but I was kind of grouping them together as the expensive pitchers on the slate, and then also, pricing a little different on FanDuel and DK. But I like Alcantara as a relative contrarian option on this slate, because have you taken a look at that Phillies lineup that came out recently?
I popped it into my model before. I also just spit all over my monitor as I was saying. I really popped that pee.
So that was the real goal. I wanted to make you spit everywhere. But it's a weak lineup. So they have Bryce Harper in there, presumably just because he's the current leader for MVP, and it's a fairly close race between him, Juan Soto, and Fernando Tatis. So I think they have Harper in there just to accumulate some counting stats. But This Phillies lineup, Herrera, Torreyes batting second, Bryce Harper's in there, Brad Miller, Gregorius, Galvis, Jankowski, Knapp. There's a few teams out there that are playing really weak lineups, and the Phillies just recently eliminated from playoff contention yesterday. As a result, it just kind of looks like waving the white flag. We have nothing to play for. I like the spot for Alcantara at low ownership. He's had a really good year. In general, he hasn't been the highest strikeout pitcher. But look at this B lineup he's going up against. So I'm really focusing on some of these lineups more so than I normally would. And this is a pretty poor lineup that the Phillies are putting out there. So I like Alcantara for tournaments.
Yeah, I was thinking about Alcantara a little bit at price, at talent. I think he's a talented guy, 24% strikeout rate over 200 and 2/3 innings, a 3.42 xFIP, a 107 whip on the season, good with contact. So he's a guy that I kind of liked just in general with the regular Phillies lineup here. They create runs 6% worse than average and have a 3.75% home run rate in the split against righties for the course of the season with their regular lineup. So yeah, when we're getting this version of it, I'm definitely intrigued by that. He should be higher owned, to be quite honest. I think it looks like he's at least currently going a little bit under owned. So maybe that's something that people can jump on. But Ronald Torreyes and Odubel Herrera have no business at the top of a lineup. Odubel, I've talked about it on shows and written about it a little bit in the leadoff role, at least as of a week ago. Over several hundred plate appearances this year in the leadoff spot, he had a sub 300 on base percentage. Ronald Torreyes has a 290 on base percentage overall for the course of the year over 333 plate appearances. That's not guys who should be hitting 1 and 2 in any lineup whatsoever. Bryce Harper, Brad Miller, the only real threats. Didi, I guess you can throw into that bag as well. The only real threats in the middle of this lineup. So yeah, fire away with Alcantara. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and the other reason too is there's really nobody this team would be batting at leadoff. Be like, oh, there's a good hitter that should be hitting leadoff. You mentioned those other guys, but it's like what else Brad Miller, Didi Gruers, they shouldn't really be leadoff hitters either. Neither should Galvis or Jankowski or Knapp. So it's a weak lineup, and that's something that becomes less of something we really have to talk about in baseball over the course of the season. There generally isn't weird lineups like we see in NBA where it's all of a sudden like, oh, look at this starting lineup change. This is something that we really have to consider for a couple of spots, the Phillies being one of them. And that's something that's getting me on Alcantara. And it kind of goes the other way too, in terms of teams' motivations. We have certain teams that are just, playing weak lineups. On the other side too, with pitchers, I don't know what to make of Lance Lynn today. He's going to be the chalk today on DK, projected for nearly 40% ownership. Over on FanDuel, he's projected for 20% ownership. It's a really favorable matchup for him against the Detroit Tigers. I just have no clue what to expect in terms of length. The White Sox have nothing to play for. They've been limiting their pitchers basically the entire second half of the year. But on the other hand, also, they had Lance Lynn throw over 100 pitches. So is that an attempt to make sure his arm's in shape and to ramp him up for the postseason? I'm not really sure. So just with the uncertainty of Lance Lynn, here's the stance I'm taking. I'm just going to be around the field on him, and my slate will be made or broken elsewhere. But do you have any stronger feelings?
Not really. I wrote about also not really knowing what's going on with the situation with Lynn, right? It's a situation where it makes sense that they're probably going to limit his the depth to which he pitches in this game. But he's a guy who is characteristically, he's always pitched deep into games throughout the course of his career, multiple seasons into the 200 innings range. Last full season in Texas 2019, 208 in the third innings. Last year in just 13 starts, he threw 84 innings. He's been way off that pace this year. The White Sox have been managing his innings a little bit. He also dealt with a couple lingering injuries that put him on the shelf, and he missed a couple starts here and there. So he's made 27 starts, only thrown 152 innings. So he's way behind his normal pace that his arm is used to. So I don't think that they need to roster him here. So it would be doing it, or to rest him here rather, it would be doing it out of an abundance of caution, which Tony La Russa's kind of old school. Lance Lynn's got that kind of mentality where he wants to be in the game, that bulldog kind of guy that you hear about. And I don't think he'd be the type to be afraid to tell Tony La Russa, hey, I'm pitching 6 innings today unless I get blown up, and just leave me out there, Skip. And La Russa's the old school kind of guy who will say, all right, you're the pitcher. That's kind of, so just being a baseball narrative, I can see the path to where he'd be pitching a 6-inning start here. And in 6 innings, Lance Lynn is more than capable of getting through this team. He threw 6, like you were just saying, in the last start. So there's additional support for that. It's not just me speculating. That said, if they pulled him after 5, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I think he's getting at least 5 though. And he could post a reasonable start in 5 innings against this team.
And the other narrative here, the AL Cy Young picture, despite what sportsbooks odds have posted, I don't think Robbie Ray's a runaway Cy Young candidate. Like, he hasn't been particularly terrific. I know people are probably tired of listening to me crap on Robbie Ray at this point of the year, because I've bemoaned about how annoying his left on base rate is. But yesterday, he still leaves everybody on base, but gives up a whole bunch of home runs. That aside, I think there is a little bit of something to be said that maybe Lance Lynn says, hey, I'm in the thick of the Cy Young race. I want to get one more start under my belt to boost my numbers a little bit. Maybe that's something else that extend the numbers. Sure. But once again, he's going to be fairly popular, right around 40% owned on DK, FanDuel around 20%. I think it's warranted, though, just considering how good of a spot it is and that there aren't that many pitchers to like today. So I'm just going to be around the field on him, and I think that's a reasonable way to approach it. Here's somebody else who, different kind of luck, Ranger Suarez. He hasn't, when I talked about the luck that Robbie Ray's had, it's based on, left on base rate and batting average on balls and play. Ranger Suarez only pitches against crappy teams. Ever since he's become the starting pitcher, moved into the starting rotation and has had his pitch limit restricted, he only goes up against the worst offense in the National League. There's never a point where it's like, hey, let's see Ranger Suarez tested in Los Angeles. Let's see Ranger Suarez on the road in American League Park. He only pitches at home against miserable offenses for the most part. So here are his run of starts since moving into the rotation, having his pitch count lifted. Home against the Diamondbacks, at Miami against the Marlins, his only road start. Home against the Rockies, home against the Cubs, home against the Orioles, home against the Pirates, and now he gets to close out his regular season by pitching against the Marlins again. I don't know what the true talent level of Ranger Suarez is. I tend to think that he's not as good as his numbers suggest because he's only pitched against crappy teams. But once again, he's pitching against a crappy team. So what are you going to be doing with Ranger Suarez when he's been priced up a little bit and now he's 40% owned on DK and 20% on FanDuel?
Yeah, I think, look, for what we've seen so far, 25.1% strikeout rate, a 3.41 xFIP, a 1.0 whip, induces swinging strikes pretty well. And just the idea of going up against this Marlins team, we know there's a ton of strikeouts. We know there's a pretty big time lack of power and offensive upside there. I think he's actually still low priced at 8,800 on DK. It's just about the ownership for me. And everybody who's watched this all year long knows I like to get away from those higher owned plays, particularly when it's somebody who I think has been pitching above his head, has been, benefiting from that weak schedule, but it's a really weak opponent. Like, he's continuing that trend. So there's no reason to expect that he's not going to do what we've seen him do over these last few starts again tonight. It's just the idea of you're just kind of riding along with so much of the field if he does it. And you're not getting the major discount that we were when he was like, 1,000 cheaper, 2,000 cheaper, whatever it was on DK. At 9,000 on FanDuel, I think he's drawing too much ownership at 20%. Like, that's more than I want to pay, I think, here even for this spot against the Marlins with that much ownership. So it's kind of the same story across sites, even with the one pitcher, even where I wouldn't be at all shocked if he came in and just turned in the highest scoring pitcher score of the night. It's a really good spot for him going up against this Miami team. Over the course of the season, Miami against left-handed pitching, 26.6% strikeout rate is the worst in baseball against either hand. Create runs 20% worse than average, 274% home run rate, a 134 ISO. There's nothing in that Miami lineup. A couple individual hitters that we like every now and then. They lost Jesus Sanchez. He went on the IL last night, one of their best performers this season. So, just nothing to see in a diminished version of that Marlins lineup. So if you like the ownership, if you can figure out how to roster him differently than everybody else, go ahead and fire away. It's a great spot.
Yeah, for me, it's if I'm paying for a chalky pitcher, I'd just rather it be Lance Lynn today. And, we're looking at similar price tags and ownership on them. Lance Lynn's a little bit more expensive, but nothing that's crazy. And there's enough value to be had that I don't think that the price tags are a massive issue today. So Lance Lynn at 10,000, Ranger Suarez at 9,000 on FanDuel. I prefer Lance Lynn over on DK. Similar story, Lance Lynn 9,500, Ranger Suarez 8,800. I prefer Lance Lynn there as well. Ranger Suarez is somebody who, to me, I want to be underweight to the field to. I don't think that he's a total outright fade play, but I'd rather be closer to 20% than 40%. But just asking you then about that 40% number on DK, is that a number you think you'd be around the field, over the field, or below?
Below the field. For sure. Below the field and looking to spread out probably to a range of outcomes. I like the idea of focusing on Lynn, but I think, and we don't, like you said, we don't necessarily need that 1,200 savings or whatever it is. Excuse me, that's the FanDuel price. Regardless, we don't necessarily need the amount that we save there, but I think there are a lot of comparable options on this board. So I think it makes sense to spread out, capture a range of outcomes, and build different constructions with some of the cheaper pitchers, some of the more expensive pitchers, just to put together a more diverse portfolio.
Yeah, and then also to address, because we had Robert Black in the YouTube chat, he asked, who's our favorite FanDuel cash pitcher? DK cash, you go Lance Lynn, Ranger Suarez. FanDuel, for me, it's either Lynn or Suarez, just based on what the ownership is. And I just feel more comfortable with Lynn. I think he's the better pitcher. I love the matchup, and he's at home. So any disagreements there from you?
I would be comfortable for myself taking Eduardo Rodriguez for a discount on FanDuel there. I have him projecting out pretty similarly to Lynn. I don't really mind that. I like the spot against Washington. I've gone with Eduardo hit and miss all season long, so there's no reason to not do it again here. But yeah, I mean, if you can spend and build a similar lineup, absolutely. I think Lance Lynn is the better pitcher in the better spot. But Eduardo's on the board for me.
So let's talk about Eduardo Rodriguez then. And I think that there's somebody who he kind of needs to be compared to, and that's Steven Matz, who I have a little bit of a disagreement with some of the with our top pitchers tool. It's free to use today, but we have Steven Matz with a 12.2% chance of being a top 2 scoring pitcher on the slate today over on DraftKings. Eduardo Rodriguez at 9% over on FanDuel. We have Steven Matz with a 5% chance to be a top pitcher. Eduardo Rodriguez, 4.6%. The numbers are fairly close, but I strongly prefer Eduardo Rodriguez. Much more strikeout upside. I like that he's going to be in the National League. He's going to get to face a pitcher instead of a hitter. Like you, I have also been a ride or die for Eduardo Rodriguez this year. His underlying numbers are much better than what his actual numbers are. And I just think there's more strikeout upside in him than Steven Matz. So I think a lot of people, especially if you're playing 1 or 3 lineups, maybe if you're hand building, you might have to make that decision of which pitcher to roster in the mid-range round 8K. I like Eduardo Rodriguez today. He's a guy that I'm going to be attaching myself to, and it seems like it's going to be the same for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I wrote about Eduardo Rodriguez this afternoon. I think he's under-owned for a cheap price at 8,200 on the FanDuel slate. Similar story, more overall ownership, 17.1 across the 2 spots for 85 on DK. I think he's under-owned and probably too cheap on both sites. He's been very good this year, despite what the ERA might tell you. If you look at his underlying numbers, like you just said, a 3.42 xFIP versus a 4.93 ERA, a 3.35 FIP, a 3.64 xERA, he's pitching a full run and change, a run and a half better than what his ERA looks like. And part of the reason for that, 365 batting average on balls in play against, a 67.6% strand rate. These are things that are out of his control. Once the ball has left his hand, it's out of his control. It's up to the fielders. It's up to the direction of the ball, the baseball gods, whatever you want to call it, the contact that the hitter makes. But that is a lot of stuff that is, all the things that are dragging him down are things that he really doesn't have control over. 7.1% barrel rate on the season, a 34.1% hard hit rate. So he's mostly avoided premium contact. He induces an 11.8% swinging strike rate. He walks 6.8%. It's a little bit high, but not, a little high for like an ace caliber guy, but with a 27.4% strikeout rate, there's nothing really wrong with that. So I think it's just a lot of bad luck for Erod. I'm happy to throw him in a bad Nationals lineup. The Nats, if you look at the overall for the year, like I like to with these different team stats for the active rosters, they're a little bit skewed because A, they have Juan Soto, who's just phenomenal in terms of not striking out, but B, they have a few small sample guys on the active roster right now. They've made a bunch of roster moves. They've got some young guys on the team. So right now, the active roster is creating runs 4% better than average against lefties, striking out 21.4% of the time. We know that this lineup is not quite that good. And then if we're comparing them to Matz is going up against a Baltimore team that for the season and for the true version of this active roster has a 3.97 home run rate, creates runs 3% better than average, as a 175 ISO against lefties. They're a better club against left-handed pitching. So Steven Matz, pitcher that I don't really trust anyway, haven't really gone to very much anyway, going up against the better lineup. Yeah, I don't see it anywhere near the way that our top pitchers tool does. Add to the fact that Rodriguez strikes out 27 some odd percent of hitters, and Matz I just flipped over to is at 22.3%, 3.95 xFIP, similar whip. So they're putting guys on base at similar rates, but they don't strike out guys in the same clip. That leads to getting in trouble more. That leads to more run creation and lower overall DFS scores. So firmly on the Eduardo Rodriguez side of that one.
Yeah, so we're going to be on the same page there. Erod, to me, once again, by the way, I've been overweight to Erod almost every single slate the second half of the season. And once again, we might as well go down and die with the ship in what could be his last start of the season. But this
for my dynasty team too. I traded for him in the middle of the season when people thought he was bad. So I'm all in.
And also, the Red Sox, are they really going to go out this way? It's more they have like a fairly significant lead for the wild card, and then they just can't beat the Orioles or the Nationals in games to close out the season. That would be kind of hilarious. But Liz, I really like Erod here. But one other pitcher who's on the cheaper end of the pricing range that I want to bring up here, Tyler McGill, only 7,000 on FanDuel. On DK, he is priced at a little more expensive at 8,900. I don't mind it. He's very low owned on both sites. And the Braves lineup today, I'll also ask you what I asked about the Phillies lineup because it goes hand in hand, similar thought processes. Have you seen what the Braves lineup is today?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. That's getting pretty weak on the back end there, at least once you get to the 6th spot. So 3 pretty low end hitters on the back ends. Plus you get Jock leading off into Adrianza in this 2 spot. That's pretty weak. You still do have Ozzie and Austin Riley in the middle of it. Eddie Rosario kind of underrated in the middle of it overall as a hitter. So there's maybe four bats in there that could threaten him. That's a good call. That's an interesting spot for McGill.
Yeah, so there are, it seemed like this was going to be fairly likely to happen just because the Braves clinched the division yesterday. And then when you start to see the videos come out, it's like, hey, here's the whole team drinking and everybody's got the champagne showers going. It's like, are they really going to play their core guys tomorrow in a game that's meaningless after everybody just probably got shit-faced the night before? It seems unlikely. And that was also why MLB Strategy Show this morning, I pointed out that a baseball bet that I personally liked was the under on the Braves team total and the Mets outright. So I have the Mets plus 140 today. I have the Braves for under 5 runs, and both of them have closing line value. Doesn't mean that they're going to actually hit on bets, except, I do think I have good value there. But one other thing I want to bring up is even though the Braves team total has come down, even though the money line has shifted from Mets plus 140 to basically an even line, Tyler McGill is still only over under 4.5 strikeouts. And considering the matchup he has today, I really like taking the over 4.5. That is something that I've bet on. And I don't understand why. Just think about all of the other things that I just brought up there. The team total has moved. The money line has moved. Yet the pitching prop has not moved for Tyler McGill. Considering how weak the matchup is, that value that still remains on the board. So what do you think of over 4.5 strikeouts for McGill?
I like it a lot. I had him, the implied that comes up is over 4.5 already, 4.84. And then he gets a little kicker based on the lineup that we're getting here up to 5.23. So I've got him going over 5. So I like it.
Yeah, it's a bad lineup. And then there's also different reasons.
And he's been good with the strikeouts too. 25.7% strikeout rate on the season, a 402 xFIP. He's been good, kind of underrated. He had a few good DFS starts earlier in the year and then kind of tailed off in terms of the amount that we've been going to him, I think. But that's also got him a little bit priced down, at least on the FanDuel slate. 89 is still kind of high though on DK. We're benefiting from the bad lineup. Like if this was a regular version of the Braves lineup, or even if it just had Freddie Freeman in there, I'd probably not be going to him here.
Yeah,
it's not as excited. Yeah,
it just because of how watered it's a couple of things. On DK, it's the low ownership combined with the fact we have to roster 2 pitchers. FanDuel, it's a good matchup, and he's cheap at 7,000. There isn't a single other pitcher I would consider on FanDuel who's priced 7,000 or below. So if you need to save salary, I think he's pretty clearly the guy to go cheap and punt with over on FanDuel. And DK, if you just kind of look at our numbers, and I'm not even sure if this is updated yet for the most recent Braves lineup, but even then we still have Tyler McGill 4% projected ownership with a 10% chance to be one of the top 2 scoring pitchers on the slate. So still a guy who, at least by those numbers, does appear to be under-owned. But any other pitchers in the high end that you're getting to think worth pointing out, whether it be Yuscar Yanoa, or I guess we've kind of talked about most of them, but Yanoa, Shane McClanahan. Actually, I almost forgot about this. We got a super chat from our guy, Gene B. Kim, and just saying McClanahan's name made me think about that. He asked us, would we prefer to roster Nestor Cortes or Shane McClanahan on DK today? I personally don't really love either of them. If I'm rostering a pitcher at 8,900, I actually rather go to McGill than going to Nestor Cortes. I thought earlier in the day, Cortes on the strategy show could have made sense because I thought we could have seen the Rays throw out a really weak lineup, kind of like what we've seen the Braves do. But they're throwing out, a pretty normal lineup for them. They've got a Rosarino, Wander Franco, Nelson Cruz, Yandy Diaz. So it's basically the full version of their lineup, more or less. So with that in mind, considering the price point you're at, if you're considering Cortes or McClanahan, I would personally go to McGill if you're looking for a low-owned option. But how do you feel, Nestor Cortes versus Shane McClanahan?
Yeah, I wouldn't be on either one of those guys, to be honest. It was a DK question, right? Yeah, 8,900 is too much for Nestor Cortes. I wrote about him in the tournament strategy article, Gene. You can grab that. But to me, Nestor's been pitching way, way over his head this season. 27.5% strikeout rate is the best he's had in his career since, I think it was 2016 at AA. He's a guy, half his career innings in the major league level have come this year, 88 and a third innings. He's got a pretty decent home run rate this year, but his career run rate is still over 5, 1.99, I think, home run per 9. I don't have this in front of me now. I'm doing it by memory. But Nestor is not really a play for me. He's just been above his head all season. The Rays have too many good bats. They're playing in Yankee Stadium, too much home run upside. I worry that he gets through a good enough start at that price. So yeah, I'm with you. I would pivot for price onto some of these other guys. You mentioned a guy who I think is definitely interesting, who is at a similar price to Nestor there, and that's Yuscar Yanoa on the other side of that Braves-Mets game. I think that's a viable pivot there as well. If you just wanted to go to that, you'd be taking a guy with a 26.9% strikeout rate, a 3.39 xFIP, a 108 WHIP, 13% induced swinging strike rate. a little bit of struggles in that similar high strikeout guy gets dinged every now and then for contact. So 9.2% barrel rate, 42.4% hard hit when guys are able to make contact against him. But he's going up against an underperforming overall Mets lineup that is playing a team that just locked them out of the division for good overall. So, they're not really, or that just didn't lock them out, but locked it up over the Phillies. I don't think they're going to be all that motivated to play here if you want to talk narratives either. So I see a good start here for Rizkarri Noah and not that many people on him and a very fair price for him. So I'd be pivoting to something like that.
Yeah, I prefer McGill on the other side, but maybe a little bit of bias because I have already bet on the Mets. I said in this spot, I bet the under 5 runs for the Braves team total. So my preference is McGill, but both pitchers do look a little bit underowned in our top pitchers tool. But let's get into some of the cheaper pitchers now. And one that I like quite a bit here is Jon Gray, who has pitched really well as of late. And this is a really good matchup for him. The other thing also you have to consider, whenever you look at Jon Gray's numbers, he makes half his starts at Coors Field, and it is such a tremendous park upgrade for him whenever he goes on the road. Jon Gray's always had really good stuff, and I feel like he's always just got a bum end of the deal. The fact that he's a really talented pitcher that has to pitch at Coors, which just, really sucks overall. And why I also think that Colorado, just that whole situation there, never really lends itself to them building a contending team, because what high-end pitchers are ever going to want to play there just for the sake of what their overall stats are? But Jon Gray, despite having to make a lot of his starts in Coors Field, 4.28 ERA this year, 3.88 expected ERA. His strikeout rate's been solid at 24%. He's going up against a Diamondbacks team that's actually picking up a little bit of ownership today, more than a little bit of ownership today. They're projected for 7% ownership on DK, which I think is crazy high. If I'm looking to punt at the pitcher position, or maybe not punt outright, maybe that's not the right term, but just save salary at the pitcher position while also getting leverage, I like Jon Gray here, and I don't really understand what the ownership situation is.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's interesting. I was just pulling up his home road splits for the year as you were going through that, and I thought I would find a lot of supporting material. But he's actually over the course of the season, batting average against on the road 279, at home 205. That's with a 354 BABIP on the road and a 236 at home, which is just bizarre. But his road FIP is 358 and his home FIP is 449 with a 401 home xFIP and a 416 road xFIP. So he's all over the place in terms of that stuff. He strikes out fewer guys on the road, 23.5% versus 24.5%, but he walks a couple more guys at home, 9.5% versus 9.1%. It's a weird home road split for him, but I still think that what you're saying about him makes a ton of sense. Making half your starts in Coors Field is going to make you look worse, even if it didn't necessarily work out that way this year. But in the overall, this is a playable pitcher. This is a guy who, despite making his starts at Coors Field, pitches to like league average numbers. A 408 xFIP is fine overall, 24% strikeout rate and 11% swinging strike rate, 6.1% barrels, 37.4% hard hit. Those are both subpar, better than average numbers. So yeah, I think there's upside here for Jon Gray, and you're going up against the Diamondbacks lineup that has been another team that we've just been kind of attacking, and it's kind of worked out. You do it when there's a right-handed pitcher on the mound, 22% worse than average creating runs, a 2.22% home run rate in the split. I think that's the worst overall. Yeah, that's the worst mark in baseball against either hand, 2.22% home runs. There's no power here when they face a right-handed pitcher. So definitely, I think you can get some value out of Johnny Gray here.
Yeah, that's somebody who Adam kind of pointed out during the strategy show this morning, and we talked about it. And then as the days gone on, it's something that I've definitely become interested in, and I'm getting to Jon Gray now quite a bit in the current build I have. And once again, he's only projected for 2% ownership on DK, and then you also parlay that with the fact that we have him going up against a team that's one of the most negatively leveraged stacks on the entire slate. So that's always a situation I also want to get a part of, but. Any other value pitchers on this slate that really stand out to you that you think should be in people's lineups today?
He was one that was popping toward the top of my board here at that price tag. I think there's potential to get value out of Anthony DeSclafani at 7,200 going up against that Padres lineup. I don't love it. I don't think it's like a major upside spot, but it's kind of a plug and play value where if you're not getting anybody from that price tier who explodes for upside, it would be fine to just get a handful of points for the price and kind of move on. DeSclafani on the season, 22.6% strikeouts, 3.96 xFIP, allows an 8.2% barrel rate, a 38.7% hard hit. He's very much around the league average, going up against the Padres lineup that we've talked about throughout the course of the year, and the standings bear it out, and a lot of their numbers bear it out. They've underperformed expectation. 349 home run rate, 165 ISO in the split, only create runs 1% better than average. What they do well is limit strikeouts. But again, if you're playing DeSclafani, you're not really hoping for that strikeout upside. You're hoping that a bunch of the other pitchers kind of go pop and he gets through with a clean start and maybe, a couple of strikeouts for you. At no ownership at price, it's fine. It's not a big upside play. It's not one I would make very frequently. The other guys in that range, I know Adam was talking a little bit about Jose Suarez. I prefer the Seattle side of that one. I would be stacking bats against Suarez there, I think. 6,200, the price is fine if you want to go to it. But I think I'd be more inclined to go to a DeSclafani kind of a guy or just jump up to John Gray.
Yeah, that's all pretty much in line with my kind of thinking. Jose Suarez, here's really my case for him over on DraftKings, and it's not going to be a strong one. It's if you absolutely need to save salary and roster somebody below 7,000, he's my favorite play in that sort of context. But I still, and this was kind of something I suspected earlier in the day, and then as I built lineups, I just didn't need that salary savings. It wasn't something that became essential for my lineups, and it was easy enough to just get to John Gray. But the other guys who are priced under 7K, there's Dakota Hudson, who's only pitched 3 innings this year, and it was in a relief role. I don't expect him to work very deep into the game. And then beyond that, the next top pitcher in our tool, we've got, Humberto Castellanos, John Gant, John Heasley, these guys all suck. So just based on that, if you absolutely are stacking and just playing all the expensive offense and you're in a pickle where you need to save salary at pitching, that's where I think Jose Suarez is better than the other options. Is there any other guy who you look at comparably priced to Jose Suarez that you'd rather roster than him on DK?
I mean, there's no chance that you get the innings out of Spencer Howard. I think he's got the talent to get through that Indians lineup, but he's just not been pitching at all deep into these games. 4 innings his last time out, 3 the start before that, a handful of innings through the course of the season. He's just not a guy that's been unleashed at all so far, so I don't expect any innings out of him here. It's not like he's going to suddenly pitch 6-7 innings here. He's the guy for price that stood out, but there's no real expectation of upside there. Going through the board, no, both guys that are a little bit more expensive and guys that are less. No upside for Willie Peralta against that Chicago lineup. I wouldn't be getting to John Gant. Humberto, definitely not. So yeah, I think it's a little bit limited in terms of the low end. I think it's a very fat slate through the mid range, not too much at the high end, not too much at the low end.
All right. So with that aside, then let's move over to the hitters. Also, if you guys have any questions, you could fire those in as we talk about stacks. But first, today's show is sponsored by Jock Market. If you guys are new to Jock Market, head on over to your app store, download the app Jock Market, make your first deposit using the promo code Awesemo, and you get up to a $50 bonus on your first deposit. Jock Market is a different way to play daily fantasy sports. Instead of working with lineup constructions or salary cap, it's a stock market, but for the athletes. So you bid on players as if they're stocks. You could buy and sell players after the games have already started, trade as games are going on, buy low, sell high. So all that kind of stuff. It's a fun, different way to look at DFS. Get your first deposit in there using the promo code Awesemo. That can get you a $50 bonus on your first deposit. All right, let's head on over to the stacks now, Terry. And once again, the Minnesota Twins. The field loves rostering this Minnesota Twins team, and from a price standpoint, I understand why that's the case. They've been underpriced by a good margin for a little while, especially on DraftKings. But 15.2% ownership, that's a number that I think is a little bit too steep for me over on the DK slate. Over on FanDuel, Minnesota also popular at 13%. So we just look at this team being massively negative leveraged on both sites, and there's better offense in play to me today than the Minnesota Twins. There's teams who have comparable top stack odds, which is a fraction of the ownership. I'm not getting to Minnesota today, but how about you?
No, and it would be about the ownership. I mean, it's obviously a good spot going up against the guy with a 13.5% strikeout rate over his first 2 starts at the major league level, 5.32 xFIP. It's a very small sample, so it's unfair to attack him on those points, but that's what we've got to work with. Also wasn't doing much in the minors. There's a ton of power in that Twins stack. Everybody remembers all the home runs they hit a couple of years ago and continues to go back to these guys. You're just getting way too much concentration of ownership around some of the premium hitters like Byron Buxton, Josh Donaldson. You can get away with like Max Kepler in there, maybe Jorge Polanco in the low to mid teens, coming down a little bit on the FanDuel slate. It looks like into the 10% range, but everybody else is too highly owned here. I think maybe Brent Rooker's a little bit interesting for his power upside at 2,300 and 2,200 across sites, 207 ISO, 9 home runs and just 203 plate appearances, only pulling 5 and change ownership on FanDuel, 10 and change on DK. It's just, it's not it's a good spot, but just too much of the field is there for me to, figure out a way to squeeze much upside out of it. I like the prices, but again, it's a slate where like we don't really need all these discounts. Everybody's kind of been priced down. So if everybody's priced down, the pitching is affordable today, we're just going to be looking to leave money on the table or be building very similar lineups that are filled with stars that everybody else is building if we go to that. So it's not really a play for me. I agree with the upside. They get great home run marks in my model, but it's a difficult spot to get to ownership wise.
Yeah, and so then I have to point out the team that's been chalked the last couple of days in the field is not totally sick of playing these guys. The Boston Red Sox have been massively disappointing the last couple of times out against the Baltimore Orioles. They still have one of the top stack odds of the day. The difference is that the ownership shares come down quite a bit, whereas over on FanDuel, they're under 10% of the time as an aggregate, which is about evenly fair, but they're going pretty under-owned on DraftKings. Boston Red Sox only projected for 6% ownership as a team. Now, I know everybody's tired of Boston at this point. They've been massively popular the last couple of days, and maybe that's something that drives ownership. People are like, hey, this team sucked the last couple of days. I played them. I don't want to play them anymore. I think the Boston stack kind of trolls everybody a little bit and says, hey, you guys are going to get off us today. We're in a favorable hitter's park here in Washington. And I think this is a good spot to go to Boston. I think they reached the upside they haven't hit the last couple of days, but how are you handling the Red Sox after a couple of down performances?
It makes sense to do it again today and go right back to the well, like what you were just saying. And if they don't do it tonight, do it tomorrow and then do it again on Sunday, because one of these days they're probably going to come through. It's one of the best offenses in baseball when they're owned in single digits. It just makes sense to go to them up and down the lineup. They're a little bit more aggressively owned on the FanDuel slate. You can get to like Kyle Schwarber there for under 10% ownership, though. Take him as a one-off or string him together with some of the other hitters in that lineup, and he helps a little bit with offsetting ownership. With everybody under 10% on DK, I think it makes a ton of sense to get over the field. And you're getting to very good hitters that are, JD Martinez, 4,800. That's a mistake. Bobby Dahlbeck in all of baseball, if you adjust for 400 or more plate appearances, Bobby Dahlbeck has the third best barrel rate in all of baseball, behind only Fernando Tatis and was it Vlad? I forget who, but it's him. It's Bobby Dahlbeck and four superstars too on either side of him. He's a phenomenal power hitter who's appropriately owned maybe, but definitely underpriced across both sites here. So there's a lot of bats in this lineup that I like getting to. I'm getting great power marks on them. If the field's not going to be there enough, I'm happy to get overweight on them.
Yeah, and that's also the difference. So like yesterday with Boston, I thought Boston made for a good stack, but they obviously didn't come through. But 2 days ago when they were really popular, it was a spot where they were like 25% owned with like a 15% chance to be a top stack. And now a situation where they just look to be, over-owned. But today, 9% odds of being a top stack, 6% ownership share. That's a spot that I want to be on. What are the other teams you're getting to at a really high clip, Terry? What is your most rostered offense today?
So it was Ohtani and Tatis, by the way, above him. So just looking through the board and looking what's coming up in crunches, I think the Giants are interesting once again, just given the fact that we're getting positive leverage for them on the FanDuel slate. They're coming up as still positive leverage on the DK slate, slipping a little bit toward being efficiently owned, but it's not bad. I think there's plenty of upside I know I mentioned Spencer Howard being a talented kid, but he's also, like I said, not going to be in the game very long. You get into that Rangers bullpen, which is not a bullpen necessarily to be feared, even though they do have the ability to come out and throw harder, throw more strikes, et cetera, the things that we don't like about bullpen games. It's not a great bullpen. You're getting a lot of power out of that Indians lineup, and there's not going to be anybody there. And they do get their first couple turns against Howard, who's got an 11.5% walk rate on the season. The contact numbers are there, but he puts too many guys on base. So there's going to be some opportunity there for the Indians. I like that with not much ownership and very low pricing up and down the lineup. Harold Ramirez is kind of interesting in the middle of that lineup for only 2,400 across both sites. Guy makes a lot of hard contact, 47% hard contact rate. It hasn't translated into a ton of extra base power, only 7 home runs and a 133 ISO. But that's a profile of a guy. He only strikes out 15.3% of the time. With that much contact and that much hard hit, he should be a better hitter. So there's upside there in any given slate, kind of a sense at that price. Bradley Zimmer, there's upside in a little bit of power, a little bit of speed there that nobody's going to be going to. Even Andres Jimenez at the bottom of the lineup, multi-position eligible for no money on both sites. There's a little bit of prospect pedigree there, 5 home runs and 10 stolen bases in less than 200 plate appearances this season. So upside up and down that lineup for the Indians. I like that spot.
Yeah, that's also one that Adam and I talked about a little bit earlier today. Actually, I think the reference that I brought them up in is The Colorado Rockies, the ownership has come down a little bit, but earlier in the day, the Rockies were projected for double-digit ownership, and it just didn't really make any sense to me. So my point of reference earlier in the day was that Cleveland and Colorado had basically the same exact odds being a top stack, but Cleveland was only projected for 2% ownership at the time compared to the over 10% for the Rockies. Rockies ownership once again has come down, but still the Indians rate out as one of the overall top leverage plays in our top stacks tool. I like the spot for them against Spencer Howard, like you said. So I'm on the same page as you there. Another team that I really think we need to talk about is the Toronto Blue Jays, who they have the top stack odds of the day, which that's all well and good, but they are also the most popular team now by a lot on FanDuel. 20% projected ownership going to the Toronto Blue Jays over on FanDuel. On DraftKings, we have the Toronto Blue Jays projected for 17.5% ownership. Given they do have the best top stack odds in the slate by a pretty wide margin, I still think they are worth getting to, but I'm going to be underweight to the field on Toronto. And how do you see them today?
Yeah, I think it's just another one of those cases. Spectacular lineup. It's a good spot, but it's just one where I kind of want to be away from the field if that many people are going to be riding with them at that much cost too. This is one where if you're going to roster the full 5-man of this, you're going to have to go to one of those discount pitchers, even with some of the prices that we see with the second stack that you would pull. I don't think you're getting to 2 premium pitchers and a very good second stack with this lineup the way that you want it. So unless you're going to like Santiago Espinal, Danny Jansen down toward the bottom, there's nothing wrong with Danny Jansen as a hitter. Certainly Kevin Biggio has plenty of talent at the bottom of the lineup, but there's going to be people on those guys as well. So it's not like the discount guys are under-owned or you're getting sneaky at the back of the lineup here. On FanDuel, you are a little bit more sneaky with those guys, but Santiago Espinal not really giving you all that much. 296, 356, 385 is fine, but only a 0.089 ISO on the season. Not a guy who creates on his own, really. He's a correlation play from the bottom of the lineup. That's not the smartest thing in the world to look for. So discount in the salary and the popularity. But yeah, the hitters that we want from this lineup are just overowned. It would be nice to have them. Certainly roster some of them. Undercut the field though for me.
All right, one more team I want to bring up here, and then we could open up the field to whatever you want to bring up for offenses. Then we'll do some home run picks. Also, we have to be out here at 55 because we've got a show coming up after us, the College Football Live Before Lock Show. All the more reason, guys, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel because we've covered a little bit of everything on this channel today. We've had NFL, we've had college football, baseball. Tomorrow, there's going to be MMA in the mix. There's going to be NASCAR. There's all kinds of content that comes up on Saturdays, and you always want to know when those shows are going live. But the Los Angeles Dodgers today, this is a spot for them where they're picking up a little bit of ownership on FanDuel, not all that much, 3.5%, more than the sub 2% ownership they're getting on DraftKings. And I don't find salary to be all that restrictive on this particular slate. There are some cheaper pitchers, a la John Gray I've talked about that I think makes sense. I just don't know that the Dodgers lineup, as loaded as they are, despite what some of the price tags are, they should never only be 1.5% owned on any given slate. Because at any point in time, we can see them do what they did the other day, where it's like, hey, the Dodgers are getting their asses kicked. Max Scherzer pitched terribly. The Dodgers, looks like they're playing the wild card game. That's not so fast. They're going to hit 6 home runs in the final 2 innings of the game. It's such a loaded offense, and the matchup against Eric Lauer, whatever, it's less than ideal, but I also don't think we're going to see the Brewers throw out all their best bullpen pitchers. And you can see that Devin Williams is out for the season with the broken hand, and they're overall just trying to gear up for the playoffs. So I think this spot right here for the Dodgers, while maybe not the best on the board, I all day give me the Dodgers when they project for less than 2% ownership. Is this to you a spot where it's sensible to pay up to be contrarian?
Yes, and it's different, and somebody might jump on the idea that I was just saying the opposite about paying too much for some of those Blue Jays bats, and that it would lead you into some of those lower end starting pitchers. In this spot where there's no public ownership on the team, you benefit from doing that. So it makes sense to pay up for these guys and get divergent from the field while going to one of the best lineups in baseball in what I think is at least a reasonably good spot. Eric Lauer has been pitching maybe better than I've given him credit for a lot of the season when we talk about him as a pitching option, but I think he's certainly targetable with an all-star team of bats. We have Austin Barnes in the 8th spot in this lineup, so it's unfair to include him in some of the samples I'm about to give. But going 1 through 7, the average is 24 home runs already for the season. The average WRC plus for 1 through 7 in this lineup is 134. That carried over yesterday when I said it, or the other day when I said it, rather. I think it was also 134 for the full lineup. So the average hitter in this lineup creates runs 34% better than the league average. It's a spectacular team. They've got speed, they've got power. They hit for average, they get on base. There's nothing not to like about this roster. When they're this under-owned, figure out a way to pay for them. It just makes sense.
All right, we do have a super chat here from Mike L. So we'll hit on that, and I think some home run picks. So guys, get ready in chat. Fire up your home run picks. So everything is going to go yard today. Or I know every once in a while people get really frisky and they go, "This guy's hitting 3 home runs today." None of those predictions have been right this year, but if you feel that strongly, you could fire some of those in as well. But Mike L. Here is his super chat. FanDuel GPP. He's given us a bunch of 1v1s here. It is Suarez Biggio, Gonzalez France, or McGill Semien, and also it's already a Jays stack combined with a lower owned stack. That is McGill and Semien for me. Overall, I think this is still a good spot for the Blue Jays offense. And then also, if you're playing McGill at pitcher, you don't have to be too concerned with the ownership of some of the hitters in your lineup because McGill is so contrarian at pitcher. So of those combinations, McGill and Semien is my favorite.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Why not just go to one of the guys who's been performing best in the entire league all season long, just nonstop. Bet on himself, absolutely earning himself a massive contract for next year. So yeah, go to Marcus Semien here. No reason not to. 3% ownership for the pitcher, like you said, you're already offsetting it, so you can roster some chalk there. If you had to go to Ty France, I wouldn't hate it. He's a capable hitter, but it's not the same upside as what Marcus Semien will give you.
All right, so Terry, pull up your home run prop model, and I've got the your home run dong detector stuff, and I'm going to be pulling up the MLB props tool here, and a number that stands out to me here. I know that we like Eduardo Rodriguez, but it's not like he hasn't been had this year. Juan Soto is plus 525 to hit a homer today. We have him hitting a homer 19% of the time. I don't know there's any matchup where Juan Soto, unless he's facing, like Jacob deGrom, there's not too many spots. Juan Soto should be plus 525 to homer. So just in terms of a sports bet, obviously I don't want the Nationals to win this game, considering you and I both like Erod. What do you think of Juan Soto plus 525 to homer?
That's a spectacular spot. He's got an above average 10.5 in my model. We've got some aggressively high numbers in some other spots today with some of the clunky pitching, but we're getting him at that solid above average shot. He's going to make contact probably 5 times in his 5 plate appearances. We know all the power that the kid's got. So yeah, absolutely. We can get to that one. I like that.
All right, and cue up yours, and I'm going to read off some of the ones that we have in the YouTube chat here. Joseph saying Ranger Suarez homer. That's we haven't seen somebody other than Shohei Ohtani. We haven't seen somebody predict a pitcher for home run. Jimmy Bloomfield calling for the Josh Rojas leadoff homer. Aaron Hines, Brian De La Cruz dong. Michael Roundtree, Ian Happ dong. Bean Dude calling for 2 home runs for Salvador Perez to get to the 50 mark. It looks like he's going to fall a little short of that 60 mark I called for a couple days ago, Terry, but 50 is certainly still in play. Brandon Furlow is calling for Brian Mountcastle, the first homer of the entire slate. Another guy, Easton Kennedy, he's bringing up Ian Happ and Matt Duffy, 2 homers in there for the Cubs. Nelson Cruz from Thomas Tynes, Hutchboy going with Tyler O'Neill. Lots of names being thrown out there. Terry, who's on the top of your model today?
So one of the last names you said there has vaulted into the top of the model after I made the pitching change for the Cubbies. I originally had Albert Alzolay in there, who was giving these guys decent home run marks, but they've exploded up to the top. And that's Tyler O'Neill, followed immediately by Nolan Arenado. Those were not my home run picks for the day. My home run pick actually comes from a team we haven't really talked about their offense very much. And that was Willie Calhoun from the Texas Rangers. Texas Rangers going up against Eli Morgan pitching for Cleveland tonight. Eli on the season, 83 2/3, 22.2% strikeout rate, a 4.88 xFIP, giving up a 12.4% barrel rate, a 41.4% hard hit percentage on a 19.9 degree average launch angle, 89.5 mile an hour average exit velo. That's leading to some significant home run upside for the Rangers that don't normally draw it outside of Adolis Garcia in the middle of that lineup. Nate Lowe gets a little bit. Those 2 guys have nice marks here. So does Willie Calhoun. Willie on the season, 259, 321, 385, only a 126 ISO over 271 plate appearances, 41.7% hard hit though. Decent ability to get bat on ball, 11.8% strikeout rate for the season, and a guy who was a premium prospect coming up both for his hit tool and for his power. Super cheap on both sides, getting a little bit of ownership, but I like the upside power for the Rangers here in a weird spot.
Yeah, I dig that. And by the way, I think you might have copied off somebody in the YouTube chat because right before he said that, Greg SJ1, he'd said Tyler O'Neill big fly also. So maybe a little bit of copy homework there. You got Terry looking.
That's where
over
I get everything. Is the YouTube chat.
Yeah, looking up.
If it's not coming from Sean Five.
Yeah, exactly. You and Sean V just taking whatever he says in the chat. I know it's where you're just uploading into your spreadsheets, and that's where you're making your exposure for the day.
100% Eric Lauer tonight, baby.
Hey, the Dodgers whisper. Any kind of closing thoughts you have on the slate here, Terry? If not, we're gonna sign off and hand it over to the college football guys.
No, I think that was a good way to wind it down. Throw an oddball little potential stack in there that nobody's rostering, get a little power, maybe a little bit sneaky. So I like that. Good luck out there, everybody. Last big baseball slate of the year. I'll be back tomorrow with NASCAR show and jumping right in after that into live before lock for baseball with you, I think.
Yep. Guys, do us a favor, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, stick around for college football live before lock, and good luck.